turning our hearts in love and care to all our fellow beings. And as we do each time when we think we're here learning, studying together, then to make special space in our big mind, our inclusive mind, to include all of those who've been vividly present in this life. They are so much part of our karma, and we need to include those in our bodhisattva wishes. And also it goes very deep because they've been big in our lives. They are big in our own consciousness, in our own inner story. And we need to liberate all of those stories in order to become enlightened. So whether they've helped us or harmed us or just been there all the time as a kind of color in our landscape, we include them, and then from them we extend out to all sentient beings. I think, let me just mute everybody. Sonje chodon soje chonamla jancho badun dane chapsunje dagi jinso jipe sanamje drola penchera sonje droparasho semchen tamche dewa dong dewe jodong dem parajoche dongal dong dukmal ji jodong tralwara joche dongal mepe dewa dampa dong men tralwara joche yerin chadan netang tralwe tanyom chempola ne parajoche Palen sawe lama rinpoche dage chiwara dende den shula kadrin chempo gone jizonte kuson tuje madrup sandu sol deyata shame shamawati shameta shatrum Om kurim arazite karota ke orita jovati ola yani beshuda nimale malapanaye kukure kasa grase grasana om muki para muki a muki shametane sawa graha bandanane ne krita sawa pava prawadina vimukta mara pasha satapita buddha mudra Annokateta sava mare butsarita parishude Bigat santu sava mara kama. So, a very warm welcome to this session, mainly focused on the right conduct, the Paramita of right conduct, and more precisely than that, the Mahayana Paramita of right conduct. Something's gone wrong with my lighting. I've got a yin-yang face. Never mind. So, anyway, first I need to reiterate, and that's difficult because what we've covered so far in 2 or 3 sessions is so important, but then we don't have much time. So remember, we're studying bodhicitta, and then bodhicitta in terms of our apprenticeship as bodhisattvas, our commitment to bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta, we looked at that. And then now we're looking at practice bodhicitta. And we had one whole session which talked about the paramitas for the bodhisattva in the Mahayana, which is not the same as those topics: generosity, right conduct, forbearance, diligence, meditation, wisdom, in the rest of Buddhism. They exist in the Buddha's teachings on virtue. It's virtuous to be generous. It's virtuous to follow the rules of right conduct, and so on. 6 virtues. And then in the Shravaka school, in order to free one's mind forever from suffering, they're called 6 Paramita. Paramita means what takes us to the far shore, liberation. And they do when they're practiced in the way that they're practiced in the Shravaka tradition. But here we're looking at them as what take us to the far shore, not just of freedom from samsara, but of all the qualities of a Buddha, and in particular, all the help that Buddhas can give, and on the way, all the help that the various levels of bodhisattva can give to other beings. So in that context, in a whole session, we saw that in order for a moment of your life, a living moment, to qualify as paramita, then we need 2 areas of qualities to be present. Otherwise, it's virtue, it's wonderful, but it's not taking your mind to the Buddha's enlightenment. Those 2 areas are greatness and purity. And we had a whole session, so I won't go back to unpack it much more, but the greatness was that in that moment, you have the presence of jhana, non-duality, non-triplicity. There's no solid you doing something with somebody else. No interaction. There's a state of mind that transcends the illusion of duality. So jhana ennobles it. Then prajna makes it vast, because as whatever we're doing, we have in our mind the bodhisattva journey to benefit so many beings, so pure, and to benefit so many beings in so many ways. So whatever we're doing just now, one action, is part of a whole that we don't lose sight of. So prajna makes it very vast, and then dedication makes it last forever. Those 3 make the moment great. And then we need purity, whereby we need this perfect marriage of compassion and wisdom. And the wisdom in terms of the 4 seals of Dharma on the doer's body, the doer's mind, that's you, and the doer, what is done, the action, and the end result, which is enlightenment. So we must keep that in mind, because today we need to plunge into some of the details of the Buddha's teachings on right conduct. So we need to remind ourselves that this is right conduct with greatness and purity. Okay. So, and then also what we covered before, but it's so important, so let me reiterate it, is that you cannot have one of these 6 paramita by itself, because then it's not paramita. If it's generosity with number 1, without wisdom, number 6, it's not the paramita of generosity. If it's generosity, but without number 2, today's topic, right conduct, it's not the paramita of generosity. It's generosity, it's virtue. It can be Shravaka virtue and paramita, but it's not the bodhisattva's generosity. It's not. So, in the last session, in the first paramita, we looked at generosity, and we saw that it was many things. We saw what to give, how to give, who to give it to, the right time, and so on. And then what we can give stuff, we can give our presence, we can give the Dharma teachings, and so on. We saw the details, but we saw the main point. The main point in the Shravaka system and for bodhisattvas is that generosity, giving, is in fact giving up. It's giving up ego. Ego is not a real thing. We know it's an illusion, but it's blooming powerful. It's a survivor. It's been there for hundreds of lifetimes. Never forget that. It's the trickiest thing in the whole universe, this illusion of ego. Otherwise, we'd have gone beyond it. We've tried for so many lifetimes. So shedding ego is what generosity is all about. It's the actions in which we shed, we transcend the illusion of me. And so I think I summed up that in last week's teachings through a song of Milarepa. And I'm not quite sure when to do this today. I do want to include it. I think maybe it's better a little later on. But Milarepa summed it up as, other than going beyond me, there is no other generosity. It's not giving hundreds of things to thousands of people. It's not sitting on a throne and giving endless Dharma teachings. Because you can do that with me. I want to say lots of things and I daren't say them. Because, it's easy to sit, and I see people, they sit on Dharma teaching thrones. They got it all sorted, seemingly. And they can give the teachings word for word, learned. But there's so much me present that it's a bit sickening sometimes. So anyway, and I remember the 16th Karmapa was so keen on pure Dharma, and he would cry when Dharma was done impurely. Tears. So anyway, going beyond me is what the Paramita of generosity is all about. Now, one way we can see all of the 6 Paramita, transcendent perfections, is as actually the development of generosity. Let's come back to the heart of our generosity. You promised to become Buddha, to find your true essence, so that you can help all other beings. You promised that, which means you've given yourself to everybody. Given yourself. Gift, generosity. Great. So there you are. From now on until you reach enlightenment, you're going to use everything you are, everything you have. You're going to put that in the service of everybody else. But then what will happen? Well, first of all, you are not, in the Shravaka sense, retreating from the world and cutting off every worldly thing in a spirit of closing all contact with reality. We are going to close all the doors of ego, close all of our clinging, all of our anger, all of our jealousy and pride, the famous poisons. We're going to close those, but not by withdrawing inside our own mind in shamatha, going into hermitage, withdrawing from the world. We are going to be engaged. Not only that, we are going to be engaged, and that engagement with other beings and with situations is going to be our training ground, the laboratory in which we learn. So we will expect life to come back and do what generosity is about, to challenge our ego and to use life situations as a mirror so that we can understand what ego, this long-term survivor, really is, and to see the real task ahead of us. But the point here is that we are going to be interacting with others. And so this leads very naturally into the next paramita, that our conduct with others needs to be better and better, better and better. And we'll see that extends into the next paramita, next time we come together for these teachings, that being with others is going to provoke anger, upset, and all sorts of things in us. So we need to be able to deal with that through forbearance and so on. The paramitas, as we saw a few weeks ago, go from easiest to harder and harder. They go from more obvious to more and more subtle. So this week, we're looking at right conduct. And where to start? What will we be following? Well, we'll be following, first of all, mainly the teachings of Gampopa. So I've sent you the study module, module 12, where you've got a summary of Gampopa, whichever version you're using, or some other version than these, you'll find it very clearly laid out in there. And then there's another text about right conduct, which is really very, very good. If you want just a straightforward text about the main rules in Dharma, it's this from Ngari Pandita's text, Perfect Conduct, Ascertaining the Three Vows. And this was commentated on by the previous Dujong Rinpoche. Very, very, very good. There is another work, it's bigger, it's the translation of Jamgon Kongtrul's Treasury of Knowledge section. It's a bit too much, really, for most people. But that's published now. So anyway, where do we start? Gampopa gives us the etymology. You remember last week, dana was this, it's called dana because it sweeps away. It sweeps away poverty, sweeps away ego. And just a minute, I have to regulate this. Yeah, so now we've got Shila. Now this one's interesting. Right conduct. I translate it as right conduct. It's been translated as ethics, morality, and words like that. But you know, I'm going to avoid doing one of my usual party tricks because that takes too many minutes. But it meant cool, which is a word that's come into our modern language in various ways. Cool, it's actually the word. What is the second parameter? Coolness. In Sanskrit, Shila means coolness. And the reason for that is because in India, I think many of you have been to India, you know how hot it can get. The cool shade of a tree, the most wonderful thing. It's a real refuge from the heat. So it was an automatic, something everybody understood. You don't need to be a scholar. If you're an Indian, you know, the Buddha's alive in the time of the Buddha, then the shade of a tree speaks to you, speaks volumes. So what's not the shade, the burning sun, is the power of the kleshas. The power, and they really do have power over people. Power, the power of clinging and greed, the power of jealousy, power of anger, power of ignorance. They have an intensity like the sun. And what we are practicing, what the Buddha is teaching through Shila, is how to be away from that burning power of the passions in all their forms. And so the shade is under the tree of doing the right thing. Doing what doesn't harm anymore, stopping the harm. Doing what brings real benefit to you and to others. So that's the cool place. And it's very interesting, one example often given is the golden cage of monastic vows. From a worldly point of view, oh, the poor monks and nuns, oh, They can't have a kiss and a cuddle. They can't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And look, they can't eat. They can't go out for an evening meal. They've got to stop eating at lunchtime. And they can't do this. They can't do that. So worldly people could feel very, very sorry for them. So that's like being out in the sun, the view from the sun, the hot sunlight. Now let's look at the view from under the tree. If you are a successful monastic, then you see people getting involved in romantic relationships, getting involved in fights over money, because you don't carry money anymore. You finish with money. They're getting all worked up over their house, their garden, whatever it is. And you feel so relieved to be free from that. The big deal is this. It's so big in Dharma. Worldly people, samsara, depend on what is other than them for their happiness and then their lack of happiness. What other people do, what other people say, what life does all around you, what the weather does. And then this body that we're in temporarily, this temporary home of some kind of human suit, what that's doing to you. People's happiness depends on what is other than their mind. And so the Dharma, right conduct, is to realize that happiness comes from the mind and is found in the mind. So when we no longer depend on other, and we learn to take refuge in what is the truth of ourselves. This is the cool shade of the tree. So that's the word, sila. Now, a slight technical problem when the Dharma went to Tibet, where they didn't really have a heat problem, and where the main problem was cold. So saying, look, man, great, you can be cool, was, yeah, but I'm too cold already. So they didn't turn it around and call it heat, because that didn't work in the original analogy. And so they had to find a new term. And the term they found is sultim. Sultim. It's perfect. Sul means the way, the manner. And it's the way you live your life, the way you live your practice. So your sul, your way of being, goes with the tim. Tim means the law, the code of conduct given by the Buddha. Sultim. Sultim. So that's why I translate it as right conduct. It is about what we do. It's about practice. And in particular, as in this context of Bodhisattva Paramita, it's how we conduct ourselves. If you say ethics and morals, you get into, it's more like philosophy. You have a set of values. Of course, they're your guiding light. But I prefer the word conduct to be in there because it's implied in the Tibetan term, sutim. So it gets complicated. This, of all the paramita, is a complicated one that few people go into because it's mainly based on commitment, and there are so many types and levels of commitment in Dharma, and particularly when we get to Vajrayana, then it says they're beyond any number you could imagine, because there are so many tantras with their own special commitments. But the main thing that we need to know, and that I hope to, how can you say, share with you today, is about the power of commitment. If you get this, you understand a lot. And we've had it before, but I can't assume that everyone here has been to the previous, Zoom sessions over the last 6 months. So it is the power of commitment, as opposed to the everyday power of karma. When we study karma, we make karma normally, second by second. It's even split second by split second, because our motivation and mind behind what we're doing changes all the time, stronger, weaker, on, off, positive, negative. So second by second, we are making karma. by what our bodies do, what our speech does, what our mind does. When we look into what makes karma, we get 6 factors. One of them is motivation. So second by split second. Last week we had with generosity the example of giving a cup of coffee and a biscuit. Even during the few seconds of that, your mind, your motivation, your attention, your awareness will change. So normal karma is being generated. It's like at an atomic level. And when you have moments of good karma, they produce their results later. Moments of harmful karma, they produce their results later. A lot of neutral stuff. It is, we've got a very good word in French, ponctuel. Ponctuel means second by second, moment by moment. Now this generation of karma, moment by moment, can be changed. There are some things which are commitments. And it's this: from the moment you make a solemn commitment until the time it runs out, if you've taken it for a time period, or the time that you break it, you break your promise, then that commitment is generating something positive, positive karma, all the time. It says in the scriptures, whether you're awake or asleep, even if you fainted and you're in deep coma, the fact that you took that commitment and you haven't broken it is generating something in your mind stream. So to understand this, we need to understand the mind and what colors the mind. Oh, coffee. One example given in the scriptures is that of vendetta. And families get into rows with each other, and then there's a promise of vengeance. And whether you're actually killing your enemy or not, fighting your enemy or not, through whatever you do, as long as that coloration of your mind, because it's there all the time, this is the point, it's in your mind all the time, it's you. The whole thing about ego, non-ego, identifying with a persona, identifying with the bodhisattva ideal, is about defining yourself. So you become defined as Ken Holmes, part of the Holmes family, dedicated for generations to come to wipe out the X family, whatever it takes to bring them down. It's part of your mentality. It's like putting a die in the mind. So that's on a negative way. And just in terms of commitment, there's something that's always struck me here so much in where I live, near Marseille. There are quite a lot of people either from North Africa or from tropical Africa working. They usually work in menial jobs, terrible jobs. And they're sending back everything except what they need to survive to their families. Sometimes they're supporting 5, 10, 15 people. They know that their life is getting medicines for their granny, is keeping their kids in school, even though they don't see their wives, sometimes for years. Nevertheless, they are committed and they work their socks off doing all they can. They deprive themselves of pleasure. So their whole mindset is the welfare of this larger family that depends on them. It colors everything. It's there all the time. Not just when they're thinking about it, not just when they're doing a specific action. It defines them to themselves. So this, how one defines oneself, Buddha teaches, has power. And we use this power in sultim, sila, right conduct. And so all of the right conduct section is about commitment. whereby we make sacred commitment, sacred promises. The word samaya, which is damtsik in Tibetan, means the word of sacred bond, where we take a promise. So from the time we take it until the time we lose it, all the time it is feeding us. It's what's called a root of virtue. It's like a root of a healthy tree or bush that makes the tree and the bush grow and grow every year. It's not like a one-off flower seed that makes a flower one year and it's finished. A root. And this is what we're aiming for in right conduct. And the big picture for the Bodhisattva is this: your generosity has defined you as we are defined as Bodhisattvas, as I from now on am given to everybody. My life is my gift to them. Every minute, every hour is in service through learning the Dharma to become a better mind, a better person, to serve them better. And so this generosity of giving myself is based on removing, sweeping away dana, ego, delusions. Right conduct, if we put our finger on it as Milarepa does, is one thing. It is about total authenticity in sweeping away ego. Total honesty, clarity, straightforwardness. There is no hidden agenda anywhere. There's no face and mask presented to the world behind which there's really me, me, me. Of course, this is a huge task. Ego, me, me, me has been going on for hundreds, thousands of lifetimes. It won't be easy. It won't be easy. But the essence of right conduct is how can we take this mind and make it strong in commitment, so that the strength of that commitment will be our refuge as we deal with the painful process of facing the darker parts of ourselves and shedding ego. So if you can keep that in mind as the main point of Bodhisattva's right conduct, then we're doing well. And I hope we can come back to Milarepa in a while, because his stories are fantastic. You know, I think many of you know his life story. Please read it if you don't. But you'll know the first part, how he was brought up and how his family was ripped off by the uncles and how his mother was bent on revenge because they lost everything, and how his mum sent him to learn magic to wipe out, his vendetta, to wipe out the rest of the family. He had a commitment to his mother, and he followed that commitment. And because it was a commitment to bump off all his relatives, or lots of them, it made terrible karma. So when he went to Mapa, he realized, he was told by previous teachers, man, you've got really heavy karma. And that's why he needed to work so hard under Mapa to get rid of that karmic obstacle. Under new commitments, his deepest commitment to his guru and to doing whatever his guru said was the antidote to the negative karma he'd made. So anyway, must get on with the details, otherwise I lose my job. And so, but you can find these in the books. It's why, if you're really interested, there are plenty of stuff. You can look up all the details and think about it. But it's so easy to miss the main point, which is why I try and emphasize it. Sometimes I think of Dharma like these 6 Paramita, like 6 animals in a zoo, that we study. They're there behind the big glass things. There's a place in Scotland where there's beautiful tigers, and there's a big glass screen, so you can actually be just a few centimeters from a tiger. It's wonderful. in one way, but thank goodness there's the glass. So the tiger's there, and you can read the little notice. This is a tiger from so-and-so, something like this. And sometimes we read about right conduct, generosity. It's kind of out there, it's ideas, it's ethics. We must realize that that zoo's inside us, all of the Buddha's teachings about our own mind. And until we learn with each sentence, each idea, to not think of it as Dharma out there, but this is about me, my story, then it won't really impact how it should. So anyway, promises, commitments. Now we've got, let's say, 4 key areas. Number 1, and we've not had a Zoom weekend on that yet, is refuge. Taking refuge. This is perhaps the most difficult, even though it's the first thing we do. Our first step in Dharma is the most difficult to understand. And most of my teachers, Akon Rinpoche, Taisitupa, they've said, you won't really understand refuge until you're on the edge of enlightenment. 10th Bodhisattva level. As you progress, you'll understand more and more what taking refuge really means. And why is that? It's because a long part of our journey is about getting rid of ego. We think like a me, an I, and that's obscuring the Buddha that we really are. And that's our real refuge, our own Buddha mind. It's for us just now, mainly it's an idea. It's not a reality. It sounds too good to be true, far away. So even when we get beyond ego through meditation, and we actually taste Buddha within, even from there, as we go through the 10 Bodhisattva levels, what we are taking refuge in, what Dharma really is from the Dhammakaya, what Buddha and all the different manifestations of Buddha, medicine Buddha and the Mahakalas, everything, what Buddha really is, the simultaneity of the 3 kayas, manifestation and voidness. Until we understand the realized Sangha, they're really there. They're really there to help us. They're amazing beings who've gone way, way, way before us to pave the way, to be there to help us. So refuge is the hardest, but it is our first commitment. We are no longer seekers because we are finders. We found the finest teacher that ever graced this earth, the kindest, wisest, most peaceful being in the Buddha. We found the deepest truths that are so pure, nothing can ever spoil them, the Dharma. And we found realized Sangha, great masters, who hold these teachings and keep them pure, even now, 2,500 years after Buddha. So taking refuge, that commitment, is our surrender to the refuges, our trust in the refuges. It's one of our main tools in right conduct for sweeping away through generosity our ego. So much to be said about refuge, but let's assume that's there. Then on the basis of refuge, we have 3 sorts of vows. It's why this book is called The 3 Sorts of Vows, 3 Vows. Now, actually, of those 3 areas of vows, we only, in the 6 Paramita, Practice Bodhicitta, we only study 2 areas because we are studying the Mahayana path, not Vajrayana. So we have what are called Pratimoksha vows and Bodhisattva vows. Pratimoksha and Bodhisattva. In Vajrayana, we add to that Vajrayana Samaya, Vajrayana commitment. But when we study Gampopa and when we study the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana path, as it is all over the world, then we are setting those two, Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva vows. And then in the Bodhisattva journey, if we have the good fortune to be in the Vajrayana fold, practicing Dzogchen, Mahamudra, or Tantric practices, one sort or another, then we have these Vajrayana Samaya, very, very vital. So they're the three areas of vows, Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and Vajrayana Samaya. There are lots of details, lots of details. First, Pratimoksha means prati, means oneself. Moksha means liberation. The vows that liberate oneself from suffering. These are the vows, and this is the main characteristic, the vows that prevent harm. Prevent harm. The mind poisons and the actions which come from them hurt others, but they hurt us too, through the power of karma and through the very fact that anger is a poison inside you and me. Desire, lust is a poison inside you and me, and jealousy and pride. So we want to stop hurting ourselves, and we want to stop hurting others. So Pratimoksha is the way we release ourselves. We liberate ourselves mentally and physically and verbally from harming anymore. The Pratimoksha vows developed during the time of Buddha. And at no point did Buddha plonk himself down and say, right, guys, this is the deal. This is the moral code I'm giving you. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. So when we look at the monks, fully ordained monks' rules, 250 something. When we look at the fully ordained nuns' rules, 330 something. Buddha didn't make a list. When we look into Vinaya, which is all about commitments and vows, then we have in the history part, it says how each of those monastic precepts originated. And there's a story. Sometimes the stories are howlingly funny in a way, almost some of them about sexual misconduct, irrepeatable in public. I'd feel a bit embarrassed to talk about them, even though they're in the Vinaya, and they're the reason for one of the monastic rules, which, have I broke the vow? Haven't I broken it? Well, so what happened is in the time of Buddha, we see it with our own teachers. People ask questions to the teacher. And so they say, okay, here we are, monks. Fred says that it's okay to do this. But George there, he says, no, better not do that because that's not the spirit of Dharma. What do we do? At the beginning, Buddha's disciples were all wanderers. They're homeless, literally, without a roof over their head. And it's only when, after Rajgir, in the second year, when Buddha went to Rajgir and the king became his sponsor, the king gave a bamboo grove, the famous bamboo grove, where so many teachings were given, a place where the Buddha's disciples could stay. But as the years went by, they said, well, now we're here and we've got a kind of place we can stay. Can we make a simple shelter? Gather some branches and twigs and, So then, well, you've left home, you've left all of that stuff. But yeah, you can make a shelter because it rains a lot. Simple one, right? And then what is simple? George says it's okay if we put this on and we put leaves on top to keep the rain out. But Fred says, no, you better not do that. You do something else. And so, oh yeah, how do you build a vihara? And then stories. And for each story, people needed the Buddha. They asked the Buddha to give them a guideline. And then that guideline became Vinaya, a code of conduct for the Sangha, so that they wouldn't cause themselves or others suffering. Like the way, You can drink water. So then monks who don't have possessions, but a water strainer is good because it means the insects can be strained out of the water. And then a little tinkling bell on your staff means that you can warn animals that you're coming. So you can have a tinkling bell, if you're a monk. Or each one had a story. And that ended up with all the very, very fine details that fully ordained monks and nuns ought to follow. So we've got the Pratimoksha precepts. And when we look into those, there are lay precepts on various levels. And then there are precepts for monks and nuns on different levels. It gets very complicated. But anyway, the main idea is that they are there. Pratimoksha vows, precepts, are there to help us not harm, and primarily no longer to harm ourselves, because we've been doing that since time immemorial by making catastrophic karma and being the victims of our own mind poisons. So not harm. We'll come back to them in a second. Pratimoksha, not harm. And then second area of commitments is to do good, to bring virtue. So beside refraining from harm, then on a Shravaka level, we need to do good to our minds. Learn for our mind to become stable, reliable, through shamatha, through meditation, through vipassana meditation. We learn to develop loving kindness, metta for other beings, and compassion, and spontaneous joy and equanimity, the four abodes of purity, Brahma Vihara. We need to bring virtue and goodness and a true spirit of generosity where we're not sort of giving up ego like, well, I suppose I blooming well have to. It's more like, what a joy to give up this bugbear that's been with me for so long. Use this. So many virtues to bring into ourselves for all Buddhists. So the second area is the right conduct of developing virtue, the right conduct of avoiding harm, the right conduct of developing virtue. And there's a third area of right conduct, which is specific skill in helping others. This is the most difficult. It's what all of our long bodhisattva journey is going to be about. Through interacting with others in challenging situations, we will learn what others really are. They're not you. They're rather different. They think differently. Their karma they carry is different. And so, although it might be easier to help those who've got a similarish story to ourselves, that's very, very helpful. If one's been through a certain illness, then there's an empathy with other people going through that illness, and you can speak from experience. It's very hard if you've not had that experience to really know what's going on. And when it comes to other people's psychology, mentality, and not just that, the stuff they carry from past lives that they don't know about, nobody else can see except a rather wise mind. How skillfully to deal with that. So this third area, right conduct of helping others, is the big, wonderful, wonderful task that ends up with the Buddha's omniscience and ability to help everybody. So there are three areas of right conduct. If I can just divert for a little second, something I wanted to say today was triggered by the Thai Sutta the other day. I think some of you may have seen his, when was it? Was it last Sunday? Anyway, his talk about what's called Nikmidu in Tibetan, the time of degeneration. And so there's a wonderful Guru Rinpoche Terma received by the first Akong about this time of dregs, it's called, or the time of deterioration, 5 deteriorations. And so the Buddha in his prophecies talks about this. And in general, this says the Buddha's teaching will last 5,000 years. Taisittupa said 5,500, depends how you count. But it's basically 10 periods of roughly 500 years. The nature of Dharma and Dharma practice in the world changes from period to period, like chapters of a book. So at the beginning, the first 500 years is called the golden time, when practice is so easy. There's so much help and support. The real spirit of the Buddha's transmission is so powerful. And then in the very last period, it says that then there won't be one remaining sutra or Dharma text. There'll be some vague knowledge that Buddhism was something in history. There'll be no exact transmission. So now we're in period 6. Now what the Buddha said about this current 500-year period that we're in, period 6, is that in that age, the practice of right conduct is primordial. It's the most vital. He said, whereas in the golden age, people made great virtue through all of their positive deeds and thoughts and minds and meditation. In this 6th age, those who can simply resist the downward pull, as sexuality becomes stronger, as the mind poisons become stronger, those who can simply not get drawn into it and go with it, will be practicing the same great virtue through just not going with it as those who did magnificent great deeds in the first golden age. It says this is a time to be very wary of charlatans, of whiz-bang miracle teachings. It said there will be so many false teachers who have power over people's minds. They can influence their dreams. They can influence their waking state experience, so they see things, hear things, feel that they are meeting a great teacher. It says this is an age where that's rife, and one shouldn't give it much attention. One should give all the attention to being, to basic, wholesome goodness, and to keeping the various commitments. It's the make or break in this time. So anyway, it was just a side thought triggered by the Taisittupa's teachings, and my own gratitude to Khenpo Sotim Gyaltso, who taught us some things from Kalachakra Tantra and from the sutra about the 1,000 Buddhas and so on, and told us about this time of degeneration. It's so interesting because we're living it now. So anyway, to get back to right conduct, we've had the definition of sila, the coolness. Now, right conduct needs to we had a definition for dana, for generosity, and we have a definition for right conduct, telling us that right conduct has 4 aspects. First, we need to take it properly. So we need to receive a lineage. We need to plug in. You know, if you've got an electrical apparatus, you've got the apparatus, you've got a plug, but you can't just put it anywhere on the wall because nothing will happen. Somewhere in the wall, you've got these 3 holes. So when you put your plug in those 3 holes, then your radio starts working. Otherwise, you can have a perfectly good radio And you can be putting the plug in all sorts of places, but there's no juice. For the Pratimoksha vows through the Tibetan lineage, then we have the Savastivadin tradition of ordination and of precepts. And then we have the Bodhisattva traditions from Nagarjuna, from Asanga. We have the Tantric traditions from the great masters who gave us. So we need to receive properly. Usually this is through a ceremony, like a refuge ceremony, Bodhisattva vow ceremony, empowerment ceremony. We need to receive properly. That's number one. Secondly, we need to receive with the right motivation. If the motivation is ego, I'm going to get the Kala Chakra so I can go around with my little badge. I was there, Dalai Lama Kala Chakra 1900 and whatever it was, and show off, then you didn't receive. You put your plug, you didn't put it in the holes. You plugged yourself into ego. It's no good. It's no good. It's so easy these days to build up an ego CV from Dharma activities. It's not Dharma. Khenpoken says, be so careful that your seeming Dharma doesn't become the opposite of Dharma, because it's feeding your ego. So anyway, we need to take it properly through the ceremony, and then we need to take it on our side with the right motivation. Then there's lineage. We have the vow. So from then on, until you break it or until it ends, if it's a vow for so many days or until I die, then you have the strength. It's a wonderful strength. Then if something goes wrong, and stuff does go wrong, you know, we're human and we're inconsistent. It would be marvelous if you got to this far and then you could go up and up and up and up. My journey is a bit like a bumpy aeroplane, sort of up and then down and then up and bring it back up again, and down and then bring it back up, in the hope that gradually you're gaining altitude. But that joystick that you're holding and you have to put backwards and forwards can have pretty strong winds affecting it. So things will go wrong, and we need to know what will break the vow and what will damage the vow. Now, when I said vows and commitments, right conduct gets complicated, it's there. Because in the scriptures and the longer scriptures, it goes into all the details of what damages it a bit, a lot more, what damages it almost to the limit, and then after that, what breaks it. In each case, it tells you what to do to fix things, to restore your mind's commitment, which is such a good friend inside you. Day and night, asleep, awake, even if you're unconscious, helping you. So we need to know how to repair when things go wrong. We need to know in that respect that the Pratimoksha vows, some of them, when they're broken, you don't get a second chance. That's it for this life. So with monks and nuns' vows, some things that one does means you've blown it. You can't be a monk or nun for the rest of this life. So it's compared to a clay pot. When it's broken, then it can't be fixed, smashed into pieces. Bodhisattva vow. Now, why is this? Why is this? It's because the Pratimoksha vows are mainly about your body and speech, your interaction with other beings and harming them. There we have some possibility of control because we know you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, and so on. We have possibility of control. The mind, which is the essence of the Bodhisattva vow, moves so quickly, and we can't guarantee that a non-Bodhisattva thought will never come up. So depending on how much your thinking has taken you to a place where you are excluding other beings or wishing harm or whatever it is, then it's mind. And because mind is mind, then it's compared to a golden pot. We can, if it gets dented, we can beat it out. And if you can do that well, it's like nothing ever happened. Bodhisattva vow. Of course, we don't want to break it. Of course, we don't want to damage it. But if it happens, then we need to know how to fix it. So we need to take it properly. We need to have the right motivation. We need to be able to repair when things go wrong. And then fourthly, we need respect. We need to develop more and more respect for precepts and for the Bodhisattva vows. Because what are we looking at? This coloration of the mind, which is the way you define yourself. So the more we nourish that, the greater inner help we have, especially when times get tough. So we need respect. We need to see the goodness, such utter, perfectly pure goodness of these precepts, and honor that and respect it and learn more about it and think about those who've kept those precepts so that we give ourselves more strength. So this is the definition of right conduct. Properly receive with the right motivation. You know how to fix it if it goes wrong, and then you're developing your respect. Then we can say it's right conduct. In terms of the Pratimoksha vow, then in general, we have the 5 basic precepts: not to kill, not to steal, no sexual misconduct, not to lie, and then no intoxicants. They're kind of the 5 basic commitments of Dharma. Now, to go technical, and it can get quite technical, you can't be a bodhisattva unless you've taken refuge. You definitely need that. This is in the scriptures. Not only do you need to have taken refuge, you need to have taken the commitment to at least 1 precept for life. Not to kill, or not to steal, not sexual misconduct, no lying, or no intoxicants. Most people take the precept not to kill because it's very, very important. So to be a bodhisattva, you definitely need refuge and 1 pratimoksha precept. The explanation is you're a bodhisattva, you're committed to help everybody. And it's just utter hypocrisy if on the one hand, I'm a bodhisattva to help everybody, and on the other hand, yeah, but I might kill 1 or 2 on the way. It's kind of contradictory. Or possessions are important for people. I'm giving up ego, so I want their stuff and I steal it, making them unhappy for my own temporary happiness. It's just the antithesis of the bodhisattva mind. So ideally, all 5 precepts. And then we can add more to those about humility and about compassion and being vegetarian, about not sleeping on high beds, no singing, no dancing, or things which limit our ego. There are more, but those 5 are essential. Now, of those 5, 4 become essential for monastic ordination. They're called the 4 root commitments for the ordained. So it's not killing, it's not stealing, it's not lying, and then no sexual misconduct becomes celibacy. One can add lots to those 4. For the novice ordination for nuns, for instance, there are 33 main commitments that one takes. But those 4, for all the levels of becoming novice, fully ordained, halfway there that exists in the female ordination, whether it's tens or hundreds of vows, those 4 are called the 4 root ones, whereby you lose your ordination if you break them. And if you damage them, then you need to know what to do and how quickly to do it in order to repair it. So pratimoksha vows. I have to move on quickly now. Time's ticking away. Then the bodhisattva vows. There, we've seen the aspiration vow. We had a whole weekend on that, or a whole Saturday session and a whole weekend. And we saw how you could lose it. The 4 dark actions, the 4 bright actions, excluding a being from one's mind, even one being, and so on. We looked at 5 areas of maintaining your aspiration commitment. So we see if that is lost, then how to restore it. And there's one thing that is in the scriptures, and I don't think many people do, but which is, I found so helpful, which it says that you review your bodhisattva conduct and you retake your commitment at least once in each of the 6 periods of the day. At least, it says. Most people I know who've taken bodhisattva vow don't do this, but it's what Khenpoken says, it's what's in the scriptures. It makes such sense, you know, day's a long time. So we have these 6 moods of the day. There's early morning and late morning and lunchtime and afternoon and then early evening and the deep of night. Each, you know, in the time when people didn't have watches and clocks. It's something everybody knows. You feel the energy, the vibes of early morning when the birds start singing and the sun comes up. It's got a mood. And then as the day becomes, you know, midday and strong and so on. So we make it a discipline, a commitment to stop and then to say at least the words, you know, like Sonje Chudan Soji Jona, Jancho Badu Dani Chapsanje, Dagi Jin Soji Pesonanji, Drola Penchera Sonje Parasho. From now until I reach the very heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma, the Arya Sangha. And I promise through the practice of these 6 paramita to become enlightened for everyone's benefit. So we stop and we remind ourselves who the hell we are, why we're alive, the opportunity. And in that time, then we review what happened in the last few hours in that section of the day or the previous one. And anything that was wrong, then we regret and we let go the burden of that. If our mind went into any of the mind poisons, if our actions caused some damage, then we need to fix it. It said you need ideally to fix it within one of these 4-hour periods of the day, but definitely, if not one, by the time of the next one. So, Bodhisattva vow, we need to understand what it is, and we need to be able to repair it. And then by doing this 6 times a day, then bit by bit, we can reinforce it and make it a stronger energy inside us. What I didn't say at the beginning, because there's just no time for anything, is one of the very first things in Khenpoken's teaching. Why do we need right conduct? And it says, well, you know, you've got the first paramita. Well, there you are. You're generous. You're practicing those 3 sorts of generosity. But without right conduct, you might not be reborn human. Now let's take an example these days of cats and dogs. In this world, we have cats and dogs that have got food for life. Lots of humans don't have food for life. They've got medical care for life. Lots of humans don't get medical care for life, or in some countries can't afford it. They've got love for life, most of them. They've got a lot of love and support coming in, so they've got a lot going for them. But they're animals. They can only do what animals can do. And being in an animal biology, then of course, you know, they'll rip another cat's guts out if they can, if there's a fight. Or if it's a dog and a bitch is in heat, they're not going to think twice about ethics and morality. They just go for it. It's the way nature works. And you could put them in teachings all day long and they'd certainly enjoy the vibes, but they wouldn't really understand the Buddha's message about the mind and how to work with it. So animals can have many qualities, and they can have the results of past dharma, because having given themselves and given things and given their companionship and strength and given dharma, then stuff is coming back to them as good qualities, but not the good rebirth. So the paramita of right conduct is what gives us the human, or sometimes divine, rebirth, whereby we can practice dharma. So we need to know that. And it says also right conduct is like the legs that take you to enlightenment. Just like you can't walk somewhere without legs, then without right conduct, you'll never get, no matter how much you meditate. There's no kind of yogic trick where you can hold your breath or do some gaze with your eyes, and then all of a sudden you're enlightened if you don't have that basic goodness. So I'm going to stop there. I'll probably come back to a bit of right conduct next week, because I did want to share last week Milarepa, and this week I'm going to have to go into our discussion and question time in order to share it. So Milarepa. Now, what you've got, what I sent you as support material, where is it? For 2 Milarepa songs. Now these are they're both about the 6 Paramita, but different, and they're in different context. So one of them, let me look at the paper I gave you. It says in brief at the top, given at the Saddle Rock Cave to a Tantrika. What's this? Support material. So a Tantrika, what there were in Tibet, like you see often in Nepal and other Buddhist countries, is somebody who's very good at doing rituals. And it's kind of their Buddhist job. Families call them in. Somebody's sick, can you do this prayer? Somebody's dead, can you do these prayers? And then we want good fortune, can you come and do this prayer? So they're very good at Buddhist rituals. And there was one of those who came to Milarepa, very sincere man, and he said, I want to learn more about the real spirit of Dharma. So in the first song you've got, then Milarepa tells him about, amongst other things, the 6 Paramita, and he gives the more, let's say, relative truth, or the more generally shared teachings on generosity. So there, to him, for the first 2 Paramita that we've been looking at this week and last week, he says, homage to all the authentic gurus. Wealth and material goods are as transient as morning dewdrops on the blades of grass. Be generous so as to destroy the clinging mind. All the wealth we had in past lives, we can't even remember it. It came, it went. Property, homes, things, stuff. It came, it went. The stuff of this life is the same. Its use is to bring us dana, a mind that lets go of clinging and finds its true nature. Then we own it. By giving it away, we own it because it's served us well. And by hoarding us, it serves us not at all. It's not a wealth. It's something that's damaged us. It's a poison. So, like dewdrops on the tips of grass, we look on our possessions that way. and see them as a means for generosity. This is the general teaching. And then about right conduct, he said, guard right conduct like you guard your eyes. While you still have this chance to make true use of this precious human existence. Yeah, right conduct. Of all of our body, the eyes are so precious, and they show us where to go. But there's, damage to a finger is much less than damage to your eyes. So in our lives, right conduct is so precious, good conduct. So that's what he says there. Jesenden lame shablando no se tsakiz wadra jaksem me parajin pando daljon polen peze mege trebushen suten song and so on. I just sing you those few words from that song. So you've got the transmission for those two verses. Now, the other song of the 6 Paramitas is very different. This is quite interesting. He was in an area where there were 3 scholars. They didn't like Milarepa being there. They had the whole area sewn up, with Dharma teachings. They were the big shot. They know all the teachings back to front, formal teachings. And then there's this kind of renegade. Did he ever study? Does he really know the Dharma teachings? And so they decided they needed to get rid of him. But of course, how do you get rid of somebody? It's very similar to Shantideva's story. They thought, we must shame him, make him realize he knows so little Dharma. Okay, he's up there doing his yogic postures and stuff, but is he really a Buddhist? Has he really got the teachings? We'll make him so ashamed he goes off somewhere else. So they went up there to shame him. And of course they couldn't. And one of them, of the 3, all of them get shamed. This instant karma. They get shamed themselves by his deep, deep understanding. And one of them becomes a very good disciple, Dalo, his name was. And there what's interesting is that they know all the details about the 6 paramitas in the regular Mahayana scriptures. So he puts his finger on the essence and he says, in fact, he teaches them about the 10 paramita, because other than these 6, we go on to 10 when we look at the bodhisattva levels. He puts his finger on the very essence. He sings, there's no perfection of generosity other than dispelling clinging to me, me, me. That's it. Everything about generosity ends up as what I've been explaining. It's all about, is there me, ego, I behind this or not? If you're getting rid of I, is generosity, then the rest of it, whatever you give in terms of Dharma teachings, in terms of stuff, in terms of your support to others, then it's certainly not the paramita. And then there is no perfection of right conduct, no paramita of right conduct, other than ending deceit and hypocrisy. All of those, so many rules for the monks and for the lay people, and the bodhisattva rules and so on, and stories and examples. In the end, in this dana of getting rid of ego, then it is learning to be authentic, clear, no hidden agenda, no face out there which looks egoless, which looks good, which looks holy, and an in here which is still very, very samsaric. So let me sing you some of that. It's a long song, this one, so I won't sing all of it. Do ning me san chen chak tu sol cho cha do shi waran jin jelo che la de jin tam pa da lo nian me che nyam pe nian ni do ga zhao sigla sem sem ne se sun ye ze pa ma so da da ni nyam len che na le do nik me sem chen nya mora me dik chen kala zalame da da zen pangwe parona jimpa chawa lo name yo ju pangwe parona sultem chawa lo lo sonam die tamche zikvane tomnenye pedronam pamchine je gana chipala trukpai sipet sole drowa sho janchup semchu rinpoche ma jepa non je joche jepa nyampa me padam kongne kongdo parwara sho. So I've intruded into your